Hello, welcome to Resort Trades Lunch Bunch. I'm Sharon Wilson. I'm publisher of Resort Trades. This is meant to be an interactive session. It will be brief so we don't hopefully wear out our welcome, 30 minutes. Then we may run over with questions, but I hope that as an interactive session that you will contribute questions and certainly answer our poll questions as well. We're very happy today to have as our speaker Lena Combs. Lena is partner and practice leader of hospitality for the Withum Orlando office. And perhaps you received your copy of September's Resort Trades. The marijuana leaf was because one of the articles, Weed in the Workplace, was about handling weed in the workplace. But inside her article, along with a partner of hers or associate, Ray Baston, Resort Budgeting Tips in the New Normal, it further describes the topic that she'll be speaking on today. If you missed the article, you can find it in our archives at resorttrades.com. And before we get started, let's go ahead and start with a couple of poll questions. We'd like to first of all, we'd like to find out who you are, get better acquainted. So you may have already seen the poll question, and you can respond at any time. Resort manager, board member, other stakeholder or vendor. And the second, at the end of this second poll, we will provide you with the answers. What kind of resort are you part of? A legacy resort, developer controlled or involved, branded, or none of the above?
Great. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. Again, my name is Lena Combs. I'm a partner with Withum in the Orlando office, and I'm the practice leader for our hospitality services team. Withum is a top 25 CPA and advisory firm with offices across the country. I've been working with resorts for 25 years or so, providing audits, tax compliance, and consulting services. And this budgeting topic is very near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of conversations with my clients about just this topic. So I'd like just to say welcome to all of our participants. Thank you for having me today, and I hope that you learned something, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So today we're going to talk about what is budgeting in the new normal, and I use my air quotes for that because none of us really knows. Talk about some cost-saving measures, maybe some alternate revenue streams, of course, bad debts and increased expenses, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers at the end. As Sharon said, we'd like for this to be collaborative and participatory, so please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. As I said, we're trying to still determine what the new normal is. What does that actually mean? And I personally think it's going to be a couple of years before we really know what the long-term effects of the pandemic will be, not just in the hospitality resort industry, across the world, certainly. But for resorts, the effects on maintenance, assessment, collections, and rentals are certainly of the highest interest right now. They're large drivers of a resort's budget, and they're very difficult to predict. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if owners are going to pay, if they're going to come. So also there's likely increased expenses right now for items related to employee and guest safety. So we need to be sure in our budgeting efforts that these are considered and realistically considered. Payroll and staffing could be streamlined right now, so that could provide some cost savings that need to be considered. And it's also time to tune up the collections process as we go into billing season. And remember, in budgeting, there's a fine line between holding assessment increases to a minimum and a resort's sustainability. So managers and boards have to balance guest satisfaction and long-term viability. guest and owner satisfaction, I should say. Reserve funding for replacements is a big one here. A lot of resorts will tend not to fund reserves to save assessments to their owners, but doing that could inadvertently hamper long-term viability. And I would also say that it is prudent here to have multiple backup plans. You have to set a budget, you have to do your billing. But what we do know is that we do not know what the future will hold. So we need to be positioned to pivot when or if needed. And multi-year projections will have to be adjusted as the new normal crystallizes. What I'm hearing our clients say is a one-year budget isn't enough. Even 2 or 3 might not be enough from a projection standpoint, that we've really got to be looking out longer term and changing those projections as we get more information about what things look like.
And Lena, this might be a good opportunity for your third poll question. By the way, the answers to the first one of who is in the audience, 25% are resort managers, 25% are board members, and another 50% are vendors. And we don't have any other stakeholders, so at least they were not admitting to it. Then what kind of resort are you part of? 50% were legacy, and the other half are not, are none of the above. So
potential cost-saving measures outside of the norm. We need to look at things with a different lens. So maybe there's an opportunity to cross-train employees across related job functions. So as our staffing may be reduced from closure or scaled down operations, cross-training employees will allow a resort to do more with less. And evaluate job responsibilities and review headcount as part of that to eliminate duplicative efforts and tasks and make sure that the right people are in the right seat on the bus, especially as many resorts might be in the rehiring process. Really take a hard look at how we can get people cross-trained for efficiency and cost savings. Maybe look for energy saving opportunities, such as more efficient bulbs, automatic switches, solar power. But in any of that, in any effort like that, you need to consider the cost benefit and make sure that your benefit's going to outweigh the cost, even if it's in the long term. And then possibly for food and beverage operations, if your resort has that, we could streamline that, and other ancillary operations for that matter. Maybe serve limited menus to reduce food waste, evaluate inventory needs, and look at paperless options for menus. We see that in a lot of restaurants here where I am. There are no more menus. It's all just with a QR code, and you get it online. Again, saving costs for each of for the resort and the operations there. Leverage technology. You know, for the last few months, we've all been doing this more than ever. Our managing partner said, I've been asking you guys for 2 years to use Teams, and all we needed was a pandemic to force you to do it. How can we further leverage technology for cost saving and implement that as part of our budget going forward? Review insurance and property taxes. These are large costs for most resorts. For insurance, you can review your coverage and replacement costs that are stated, as well as liability limits. I would in no way want to suggest that you decrease them unsafely, but there are circumstances where they are higher than they need to be. There could definitely be some room for savings there. And for real estate values, as we go into what might be reduced valuations, it could be time for a valuation adjustment filed with the property appraiser's office. There is timing to be considered in that. You need to be sure you understand the rules of your county and your state so that you do that in the time frame that you need to get those savings. There are consultants who provide these services on a commission basis, and they get commissions off of the cost savings, so there's no cost and out-of-pocket expense to the resort. Maybe take another look at outsourcing certain functions of the resort. Are there some things that could be outsourced in a more cost-effective manner? And most important, you have to practice cost discipline, and the budget should reflect this. Every dollar counts. Some items may seem quantitatively insignificant, but over time, it all adds up. One example may not make me popular right now, but is board travel. A lot of, we're in Florida. A lot of our resort board members like to come down and have board meetings. Since we're all leveraging technology for virtual meetings, do we really need to go back to spending that money for in-person board meetings? I don't know, but each resort needs to evaluate that for themselves.
I can go ahead and interject the third slide, or rather poll question. That is, what is your current occupancy? That would be very interesting. And that would be, let's see, less than 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or over 75%. Very few results at the moment, but we currently do have one response that says they are over 75%. So that sounds great. I have heard anecdotally from other resorts that they are experiencing good occupancy rates, particularly when most of their owners are at a drive-to destination. So
sure, and that is a great segue, Sharon, for this slide. Refreshing marketing strategies right now, I think, is important. Each resort needs to evaluate the rental marketing and any other revenue streams as well. This is kind of low-hanging fruit. But look at what is and what is not actually making money. But for marketing rental, look to your canceled reservations. Those are people who already have an affinity for the resort. Look to previous guests and drivable distance marketing for some potential focus efforts. One idea we've been hearing about is the WFH. In our office, we call it work from home, but in this case, work from hotel. There's a new movement. People want different walls, and they can work from anywhere. So can you market a plan for implementing something like that to increase rental revenue? If you have unused meeting or convention space, what are some ways that you could monetize that potentially? Can you repurpose it to do some warehousing, i.e. Amazon? We hear all the time Amazon's looking for more space for storage. Storage facilities, or even learning pods, depending on your market. In the market where schools are locked down, learning pods are becoming sort of a popular option to get the kids out of the house with a tutor, for lack of a better word, in a safe setting where they can be together and be learning. So just as some potential ideas of things that we have heard from some of our clients. My favorite, bad debts. Bad debts are on average 10 to 12% of a resort's budget historically. And I know that that's a gross generalization, but typically that's what we see. That's the second largest expense next to payroll. Payroll is 30 to 40%. The maintenance is up there, of course, but this is a big number. And although our historical information is important when going into the budget process, we don't know what the future is going to hold for collections. What we tend to see is that bad debts become the plug to balance a budget when we're trying to keep maintenance assessments artificially low with zero or minimal increases. However, utilities are going to increase every year. The cost of living increases, the cost of goods increases. So it's difficult to have a balanced budget if we're not really taking a good hard look at what we realistically think bad debts are going to be. And this can cause more problems regarding long-term viability of a resort. It can cause deficits. And each resort is in a different situation. To Sharon's point earlier, some have many foreign owners who can't travel. Some are in desirable locations such as beach and mountain areas that have great occupancy right now. Resorts around theme park areas like where I am, they're struggling. So there's not any one size fits all type of plan for budgeting for the resorts. The plan has to be one size fits one. Each resort management and the board need to look at their situation and make a budget that fits their reality. If there were previous deficits, there needs to be a plan to recoup these through this year's and future year's budget, depending on the size of that deficit. So, and finally, we need to plan for increased operating expenses. So we know that we have PPE and we have new safety equipment for our guests and staff safety. This is going to have to be maintained and even replaced. We need to be sure that that's adequately budgeted for. Safety and sanitation equipment. Housekeeping, what I hear is that there are more intensive cleaning protocols, and there's a longer turnaround time and higher cost with that. So we need to be sure that that's adequately budgeted for. And then, of course, our reserves and capital improvements. Again, you can keep those at a minimum for a short time, but the longer you put those off, the more of a sustainability issue that causes for the resort.
Well, we had set up a poll question to kind of ferret out what the experience is amongst our attendees as far as has the pandemic affected your resort's strategic plan and budgeting? And so we asked, has the strategy and budget process not changed? Or we are not focusing on changes to strategy until the long-term effects become clear. We're creating a new strategy that reflects the new realities of our environment, and our strategy and budget process remains valid, but we are updating it in response to the pandemic. So far, everyone says we're creating a new strategy that reflects the new realities of our environment, which I must say, I'm sure your firm and ours doing the same thing, Lena.
Right. I think, just to kind of close that, strategic planning has often been thought of something we do once every 3, 5, 7 years. With the technology increases and the speed of the world, that number is shrinking, right? We're going to see more, I was going to say more sooner. We're going to see
even
smaller gaps of time between strategic plans. And that needs to be a constant process. And it's not just once every 3 years. We need to go back and revisit, do SWOT analysis. And that involves all the stakeholders in the resort. And look at what changes. No one ever would have predicted a pandemic. Very few companies predicted or included a pandemic response in their strategic plan or in their disaster recovery plan, right? But now that's kind of the new normal, and people are including that. We need to be sure that we're doing that periodically and that it's getting updated frequently, because things change. If that's the one thing we have learned this year, is that things change out of our control, and we just have to learn how to pivot. So just sort of some closing comments. I think it's clear that not everything is black and white. It's not clear cut.
Now, I have a question. At one time, you had written for Resort Trades, and I forget if it was last year or 2018, emergency preparedness, or maybe it was even this year. I beg your pardon. But I know that this will become a big part of your strategy that you suggest, I would imagine.
Right. And we've written about that both from a disaster standpoint and from an organizational planning sort of focus. And I think that that's really important. And there's some hard decisions that are going to have to be made in that. I think, and people, our boards, our managers who are involved in that process need to be prepared to make some of those difficult decisions. It is a multi-year process. Be flexible, be fluid. We need to evaluate results, change forecasts going forward. I know it sounds a little daunting when I say all that, but I think that this is the new normal. This is what we need to be sure that we're considering. And as more facts emerge about what that looks like, plan to address them as they are known. be swift, take action. Like we talked about, consider strategic planning to identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And as your speaker at the lunch bunch said last week, communicate.
And even over communicate.
Stakeholders, the owners. But as things change and things need to be changed, communication is the one thing that it will at least can keep sort of the lions at bay, I guess, so to speak.
Well, we do have a question. What would you say is the number one failure in budgeting for resorts?
The over-optimism of collections. We see almost 75% of our resorts inadequately budget for bad debts. They think collections are going to be higher than they are. And since the Great Recession, collections have really stayed steady. We had a huge drop, but they've not significantly increased since then. And I think just being realistic about that is a game changer.
Yeah.
And I would also say trying to keep assessments low, trying to keep them with no change.
Yeah, unrealistic.
Owners happy is unrealistic.
Yeah. Well, as a follow-up, the question came, what should resort management and the board do if they can't find a way to balance the budget in the current year because the increases would be too large, which follows directly on keeping the assessments unrealistically low.
Right. And I think this goes to the multi-year planning aspect. You can, maybe you can't do it all this year. That's just real. But make a plan that over 3 years, you're going to get assessments up to whatever point is the viability point. Because if you don't have that plan, if you don't have it in mind, and communicate to your owners. We understand this would be an onerous increase this year. We're going to do it over 3 years. It's so different than a special assessment communication and giving 3 years to pay. If a resort has the financial wherewithal to sustain through that period, then I think that's really the only feasible way to term that out over a longer period.
Yeah. Well, Lena, thank you very much. You've really provided a lot of great information. And I wanted to just make our audience aware that Lena has frequently contributed articles, she and her team, to Resort Trades. You can find them in our archives. You can go on to resorttrades.com and do a search for her name. Most recently, since October is, after all, cyber security or cyber awareness.
What is it? Awareness Month.
Yeah. In this month, October's Resort Trades, Lena and her another associate of hers, Amy Lafontaine, that's the French pronunciation, wrote a great article, Cybersecurity Tips for the Hospitality Industry. Always such informative stuff, Lena. I really, we appreciate your content very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It's our pleasure.
Well, thanks. Now, to all of our attendees, thank you for joining us today. Our next Trades Lunch Bunch will be next Friday, October 23rd, and we will have as our guest Melody Bostick-Brown. She's publisher of, well, here it is right here, publisher of Destinations Magazine. You can read about, she also has an article in the October issue about using storytelling to get your guests interested in traveling again. And I think it'll be very inspirational, motivational, particularly to resorts who are trying to tackle this very issue. So please visit resorttrades.com/learning center and register. And when you do, I hope that you will check the box at the bottom, which entitles you to be notified of additional or future events, and automatically put your information in there if you want to attend. So thank you and have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.